The ultrasound photo scattered across the hospital floor as she drove her heel straight into my pregnant stomach. "Your baby was never meant to survive anyway," Cassandra hissed, standing over me as I gasped in agony. But what happened next? She never saw it coming. Neither did my husband. "Hi, I'm Emma, and I'm 34 years old. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything. A loving marriage to my college sweetheart Daniel, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and most importantly, our first baby on the way, after 3 years of trying. I wasn't some glamorous socialite or wealthy heiress. I was just a high school art teacher who painted landscapes on weekends and dreamed of creating a nursery filled with hand-painted murals for our little girl. Daniel worked as a marketing director at a tech company, and we were that boring, happy couple who held hands at the grocery store and still left each other little notes in lunchboxes. But I had something they didn't expect. A backbone made of steel and a family who'd taught me never to let anyone walk over me, no matter how much it hurt to stand up. If you've ever been blindsided by the people closest to you, hit subscribe right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one, and trust me, you're gonna want to see how this ends, because sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous when you push them too far. It started with a text message at 2:47 a.m. I was 8 months pregnant, uncomfortable, and couldn't sleep when Daniel's phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a message from Casey that made my blood freeze. "Baby's kicking so hard tonight. She misses her daddy." My hands shook as I scrolled up through months of messages I'd never seen, photos of ultrasounds that weren't mine, sweet nothings typed to another woman carrying his child, plans for a future that didn't include me. The worst part, the dates. She'd gotten pregnant just 2 weeks after me. While I was celebrating our miracle baby after years of fertility struggles, Daniel was already creating another miracle with his coworker Cassandra Mills. When Daniel woke up, I was sitting in our baby's nursery, still holding his phone. The mobile I'd spent hours painting spun slowly overhead, little elephants and stars that would never see our daughter sleep beneath them. "Emma, I can explain." "She's due 3 weeks after me," I whispered, not looking at him. "Were you planning to juggle 2 newborns? 2 wives? 2 families?" Daniel sat on the floor beside the crib we'd assembled together just last weekend. "It's complicated. Cassandra and it just happened. But Emma, you have to understand, I love you both. Love us both." "Get out," I said quietly. "Emma, please." "Get out," I screamed and felt our baby kick violently in response to my elevated heart rate. He left that night, but not to end things with her. The next morning, I saw them together at our obstetrician's office, our doctor where we'd heard our baby's heartbeat for the first time. Cassandra was getting a routine checkup, and Daniel was there holding her hand, rubbing her back, whispering reassurances in her ear. All the things he used to do for me. When they spotted me in the waiting room, Cassandra actually smiled, a cold, victorious smile that told me this moment had been planned. She wanted me to see them together. She wanted me to know that she'd won. But the real shock came when Dr. Peterson called Cassandra in for her appointment, and she asked to speak with me privately in the hallway. That's when she dropped the bomb that would change everything. "Daniel's been lying to you about more than just us," she said, her voice sweet as poison. "Ask him about the insurance policies he took out on you and the baby last month. Ask him why he's been so insistent you have a home birth with no medical professionals present." That evening, I confronted Daniel about the insurance policies. He tried to lie, but I'd already called our agent. 3 separate policies totaling $2.3 million, one on my life, one on the baby, and a pregnancy complication policy that would pay out if anything happened during childbirth. "It's just standard protection," he insisted, pacing our kitchen while I sat at the table, my belly making even that simple act uncomfortable. "Every expectant father does this." "Cassandra told me you insisted on a home birth." "We never discussed that, Daniel. I've always wanted to deliver at the hospital." His face went pale. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." But I'd already started putting pieces together, the way he'd been pushing herbal supplements that made me nauseous, his suggestion that I avoid my regular prenatal appointments, the midwife he'd hired without consulting me, a woman whose credentials I couldn't verify. 2 days later, I attended my baby shower, an event Daniel had insisted on hosting at his company's conference center. I should have known something was wrong when Cassandra showed up as his +1. In front of 40 friends and family members, she announced her own pregnancy, showing off sonogram photos and gushing about how excited Daniel is to be a father. The room went dead silent as people realized what was happening. "Emma's been so understanding about sharing," Cassandra continued, her hand protectively over her belly. "It's not ideal, but Daniel and I are committed to making this work. After all, love finds a way, doesn't it?" My sister Sarah jumped up to defend me, but I grabbed her arm. Not here, not like this. Instead, I stood up slowly, my back aching, and looked around the room at faces filled with pity and shock. "Thank you all for coming," I said calmly. "I think this party is over." Daniel followed me to the parking lot, begging me to be reasonable. "You brought your pregnant mistress to my baby shower," I said, each word measured and cold. "You let her humiliate me in front of my friends and family. What exactly am I supposed to be reasonable about?" "Emma, if you would just listen." "I'm done listening. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." The breaking point came a week later during what should have been a routine appointment. I was checking in for my 36-week visit when I saw them, Daniel and Cassandra leaving Dr. Peterson's office together. She was crying and he was comforting her. When I asked the receptionist what was going on, she looked confused. "Mrs. Rivers, your husband canceled your appointment today. He said there was a family emergency and you couldn't make it." My appointment had been canceled by Daniel, so he could bring Cassandra instead. I found them in the parking garage, and that's when Cassandra revealed the full scope of their plan. They wanted me to disappear quietly, to move away and have the baby somewhere else, away from their new life together. "Daniel's already told everyone at work that you've been having mental health issues," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Postpartum depression can start during pregnancy, you know. It would be so tragic if something happened because you weren't getting proper care." The conversation escalated quickly. She kept pushing, kept needling, trying to provoke me into doing something that would prove her point about my mental state. "Face it, Emma," she said finally. "Daniel never really loved you. You were just practice for the real thing, a warm-up act." That's when I tried to walk away, and she grabbed my arm. "Don't you dare dismiss me," she snarled. "I'm carrying his child too, and my baby is going to have a father who's actually present, not split between two families like some deadbeat." I pulled away from her grip, and she shoved me backward, hard. I fell, instinctively protecting my belly, but Cassandra wasn't done. Standing over me as I tried to catch my breath, she drew back her foot and kicked me directly in my pregnant stomach. The pain was immediate and excruciating, but worse than the physical agony was her voice, cold and satisfied. "Your baby was never meant to survive anyway. Daniel told me about the real plan. This just speeds things up." What Cassandra and Daniel didn't know was that I'd been one step ahead of them for weeks. You see, that conversation with Cassandra about the insurance policies had been the wake-up call I needed, but instead of confronting them immediately, I did something they never expected from sweet, naive Emma, the art teacher. I gathered evidence. My brother Jake works in digital forensics for the FBI, and he'd taught me a few things about retrieving deleted messages and tracking financial records. Every text Daniel thought he'd erased, every email about their plans, every document related to those insurance policies, I had copies of everything. But that wasn't the best part. The midwife Daniel had hired, I'd done some digging and discovered she wasn't licensed. In fact, she'd had her medical credentials revoked in 2 states for malpractice. Her real name was Sandra Kim, and she'd been arrested 3 years ago for insurance fraud involving a scheme that sounded remarkably similar to what Daniel was planning. I'd also been wearing a recording device to every conversation we'd had for the past 2 weeks. A tiny recorder my sister Sarah had given me, hidden in a pendant that looked like a simple piece of jewelry. Every admission, every threat, every detail of their plan was documented. The insurance company had been very interested when I'd called to report suspected fraud. Apparently, they'd been watching Daniel since he'd taken out such large policies so close to my due date. It was a red flag in their system. But the real ace up my sleeve, I'd already moved our joint savings to an account he couldn't access. I'd made copies of all our important documents, and I'd retained the best divorce attorney in the state, a woman known for destroying cheating husbands in court. They thought they were manipulating a helpless pregnant woman who was too emotional and hormonal to think clearly. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who'd been documenting their every move, building a case that would not only destroy them legally but ensure they paid for what they'd done to me and my unborn child. The recording device had captured everything, including what was about to happen in that parking garage. After Cassandra's attack in the parking garage, I called 911 from my hospital bed, but I didn't just report an assault. I also called my brother Jake. Jake arrived at the hospital within an hour, bringing someone I hadn't expected, Detective Maria Santos, a specialist in domestic violence and fraud cases. Apparently, Jake had been sharing my situation with her informally, and she'd been building her own file. "Emma," Detective Santos said, pulling up a chair beside my bed, "we've been investigating Daniel and Cassandra for the past week. You're not their first victim." That's when I learned the devastating truth. Daniel had done this before. His first wife, Jennifer, had died during childbirth 3 years ago under suspicious circumstances. Home birth, unlicensed midwife, massive insurance payout. The case had been closed as a tragic accident, but Detective Santos had always suspected something was wrong. Cassandra was the co-worker who comforted Daniel after Jennifer's death, she explained. We think they've been running this con together for years. Find vulnerable pregnant women, isolate them, manipulate them into high-risk situations, and collect the insurance money. My baby kicked as if responding to the revelation. The doctors had confirmed she was fine after the attack, but they wanted to monitor us both closely. The recording device captured everything, Jake said, holding up the small pendant. Not just the assault, but her admission about the real plan. Combined with the financial evidence and the pattern with Jennifer, we have enough to arrest them both. But Detective Santos wanted more. We need them to incriminate themselves further, she said. If we move too quickly, their lawyers might get them reduced charges. But if they think they've succeeded, if they believe you're helpless and broken, they might reveal more details about their operation. The plan was risky. I would pretend to be devastated and defeated, let them think they'd won. Meanwhile, Detective Santos would coordinate with the insurance investigators, and Jake would continue gathering digital evidence. Are you sure you can handle this? Detective Santos asked. It means letting them think they've destroyed you while we build an airtight case. I looked down at my belly, at my daughter who'd survived Cassandra's violent attack, and felt something I'd never experienced before. Not just anger, cold, calculating fury. They tried to kill my baby, I said quietly. They murdered Daniel's first wife and their child. They're not just cheating on me, they're serial killers. The room fell silent. Detective Santos, I continued, meeting her eyes. I want them to pay for everything they've done, not just to me, but to Jennifer and her baby too, whatever it takes. Over the next few days, Daniel and Cassandra grew confident. They thought I was broken, hiding in my hospital room, too traumatized to fight back. They had no idea I was planning their complete destruction. The confrontation happened exactly where I'd planned, at Daniel's company's annual gala, 3 days after I was released from the hospital. He'd told everyone I'd had a mental breakdown and wouldn't be attending, but that Cassandra would be there as his date to show stability during this difficult time. What they didn't know was that Detective Santos, Jake and I had orchestrated the perfect trap. I arrived wearing an elegant maternity dress that concealed the wire I was wearing, my belly prominent at 37 weeks. The moment I walked into that ballroom, conversation stopped. Daniel's face went white. Emma, he said, rushing over with Cassandra close behind. What are you doing here? You should be resting. I should be celebrating, I said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. After all, it's not every day you discover your husband's been planning your murder. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Cassandra's eyes darted around the room, calculating escape routes. Emma, you're clearly not well, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. The stress of the pregnancy has been so hard on you. Everyone understands why you might be confused. Confused? I pulled out my phone and hit play on a recording. Cassandra's voice filled the air. Your baby was never meant to survive anyway. Daniel told me about the real plan. This just speeds things up. The color drained from Daniel's face. Emma, that's taken out of context. Just like Jennifer was taken out of context, I said, and watched him stumble backward. Yes, Daniel. I know about your first wife. I know about the insurance policies. I know about Sandra Kim, your fake midwife. I know everything. Cassandra made a mistake then. Instead of staying quiet, her desperation made her defensive. You can't prove anything, she hissed. Jennifer's death was ruled accidental. Even if you have recordings, they don't prove. They don't prove you kicked a pregnant woman in the stomach in a parking garage, I interrupted, because I have video of that too. Hospital security cameras, Cassandra, they caught everything. That was a lie. The cameras hadn't captured the assault, but she didn't know that. Daniel grabbed Cassandra's arm. Shut up, he whispered urgently, but she was spiraling. You think you're so smart, she snarled at me, but you have no idea how deep this goes. Daniel's been perfecting this for years. Jennifer was just practice. We've done this in 3 states, and no one has ever— Shut up, Daniel roared, but it was too late. The entire room had heard her confession, and more importantly, Detective Santos and her team, who'd been waiting in the parking lot, heard everything through my wire. As if on cue, the ballroom doors opened and Detective Santos walked in with 4 uniformed officers. Daniel Rivers and Cassandra Mills, she announced, her voice carrying across the silent room. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and the murder of Jennifer Rivers. The panic in their eyes was beautiful. Daniel made one last desperate attempt. Emma, please. Think about our baby. She needs her father. I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear me. My daughter will never know your name, I whispered. And when she's old enough to ask why she doesn't have a father, I'll tell her the truth. That her daddy was a monster who tried to kill us both for money, but her mama was stronger than he ever imagined. As they led Daniel away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one final time. The mask had finally slipped completely. There was no more charm, no more manipulation, just cold rage at being outplayed by the woman he'd underestimated. Cassandra fought the officers, screaming threats and accusations, but her words were lost in the chaos. I stood there, my hand on my belly, watching the two people who'd tried to destroy my life being dragged away to face justice for multiple murders. For the first time in months, my daughter kicked gently, not in distress, but as if she was celebrating too. 6 months later, I'm watching my daughter Sophia take her first steps across the hardwood floor of our new home, a house I bought with the settlement money from the wrongful death lawsuit against Daniel and Cassandra. They were convicted on all charges. Daniel got life without parole for Jennifer's murder and conspiracy to commit mine. Cassandra received 25 years for her role in the scheme. The insurance fraud charges added years to both their sentences. The investigation revealed they'd targeted at least 12 other women across 5 states over 7 years. Some had died under mysterious circumstances during childbirth. Others had been emotionally destroyed and driven away from their communities. The FBI estimates they collected over $8 million in fraudulent insurance payouts. Sophia will grow up knowing she survived because her mother refused to be a victim. She'll know that sometimes the quietest people have the loudest roar when pushed too far. I kept my maiden name for her birth certificate. As far as the world is concerned, Daniel Rivers never existed in our lives. That's the ultimate price he paid, complete erasure from the family he tried to destroy. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated your strength, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. Your courage deserves to be heard. And if you're watching this from somewhere around the world, tell me where you're from. I read every single comment, and knowing this story reaches people everywhere gives me hope. Hit subscribe if you believe that justice isn't just something that happens to us, it's something we create for ourselves when we refuse to stay down. Your voice matters, and your story could save someone else. Where are you watching from tonight?